Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of This is Leadership Podcast, your intersection between growth and leadership. And today, I've got a treat for you. It's really my pleasure to welcome my guest today. We've known each other for a few years. We lived on the same street, and our sons, well, our kids actually went to the same high school, and now they're all growing up and we're almost empty nesters. So, Lisa Lamoureux-Collins, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
And it took a little while for us to find a date and to get you on. But I said, Lisa, when I first got the podcast started, the English podcast started, you're one of the first people that came to mind that I wanted, to welcome on the show. And we're going to talk about it, but it's especially because, what you've been doing in the last couple of years, what you're doing this year, which is really interesting, in your board. But before that, you were doing some really interesting work at a whole other level. And, that basically not only for your experience as a principal, of course, because you've been doing that for a long time now, but especially, that zoom out that you were able to experience, being at OPC. And we'll talk about that in a moment. I think that's a really interesting perspective, and talk about a zoom out, looking at, what principals are doing across the province, what their needs are, and where the tendencies are going. So, I'm really looking forward to getting your feedback on that, and what experience you had and what you've seen. And of course, in your new role that you just started, was it last year?
In September, actually.
In September, yeah, because you just got back from the other job at OPC. So we'll talk all about that. But before we get going, Lisa, I said we lived on the same street in Callender, Ontario. For those of you that don't know where that is, it's right beside North Bay, about 3.5 hours north of Toronto, but we're the northern Ontario. I always say that. Lisa, how about you tell us a little bit about yourself, so that we can get to know you a little better.
Sounds good, Joel. Thanks for having me again. So I began my career in education actually as an educational assistant way back in 1998 for the Near North District School Board, and then became a teacher. Went to Teachers College and became a teacher and taught everything from kindergarten to grade 8 in both English and French immersion stream, and became a spec ed resource teacher. Okay. And then went into leadership, into becoming a vice principal and then principal. So I've been a principal now since 2010, and been at quite a few different schools. And then I had the great experience last year of becoming the president of the Ontario Principals Council. And I've been involved with the Ontario Principals Council for some time now. Okay. Yeah. So, and I'm a mother of 3. As Joel mentioned, our oldest sons went to school together, high school together. And now my oldest, Ethan, is 19 and is in his second year at Trent University in Peterborough. And then I've got Ella, who's 16 in grade 11, and Jack, who is in grade 8 at West Ferris. And then I also have a stepdaughter named Avi, who's in grade 3. So yeah, it's a busy, very busy life.
So in other words, you're still like running around for sports and activities and stuff like that. Whereas, I'm not doing that anymore. So, but it'll come fast enough. But yeah, it was great to watch our kids grow up. And like you said, our sons, well, they went to the same high school, and actually hung around a few times as well at a few parties and things like that that kids that age will do. So, but just nice to see them growing up around the neighborhood. That was great. And so, interesting enough, I did not know that you started as a teacher's assistant in your career. Yes. So let's start there, Lisa. Okay, so here you are. You got started. You're working in the school. What made you want, what is it that made you think, okay, I love what I'm doing now with the kids, but I think I'd want to be a teacher. So if we can go back there and just talk about, what elements made you want to make that switch?
For sure. So I should go back. I grew up with 2 siblings with special needs. Okay. And so I always had a passion for spec ed, growing up with 2 siblings with special needs. And I started working as a respite worker and working for community living. Yeah. So I worked with many different children with disabilities, physical and intellectual. And then I became an educational assistant. But during that time, I was doing my undergrad at the same time. Okay. So my plan was always to become a teacher, but I started becoming an educational assistant as I was completing my undergrad. And so my passion has always been for spec ed, and that's why I became a special education teacher, and that was my passion.
That's great. And what is it that thinking back on the years that you were in the classroom? Now we know that that's your passion, where your passion lies is spec ed, but what is it about teaching that you loved?
Well, there's so many things that I do love about teaching, and of course, I love children, and but I love change as well, and
Mm.
education is always changing. You know that even if you're away for a year, you come back and there's so many new initiatives, and I love that. But I also love the difference that we can make in children's lives as well. And we know that that happens. We spend so much time with them, and it's just seeing them change and develop, and the progress that they make, which is amazing to see. And I always love seeing that.
Yeah, and geez, has it ever changed with the years? Now I don't want to sound like my parents. When our parents say, in our days it used to be like this, and we used to walk in snow in 6 feet. I'm not going into that kind of thing, but we started, at about the same time. I started in 1997, so that was my first year teaching, September 1997, and it's a lot different. The generations are different. Going through the years, and society has changed as well, and the kids certainly are different. So what are you seeing as being the biggest challenges with this our students in our schools today?
That's a good question. I mean, there's so many challenges. I think going with COVID and being on remote learning was definitely a challenge for many. And now being back to face,
Yeah.
definitely that really hit a lot of students with their mental health as well and mental well-being. And I think it's so nice that we're finally back in person. But that was definitely a challenge, was shifting back and forth from online learning to in person.
And you know what? When we went through it in my boards, those were the toughest situations, where our our students that did have needs, be it special needs or any kind of needs, because it was really hard to be able to give them that kind of service. It's the type of service where you need that human connection, right? That's a little bit more than what we get when we're in Teams or in Zoom or in Google Meet, whatever it is that we were using. You need that connection, because a lot of them, especially social emotional, it's that connection. It could be, it could be just the presence of the person physically. It could be just a touch on the shoulder, or things like that. So, and we didn't have that during that time, so it was really tough. And I think that those are the students that struggle the most. I think everybody struggled to a certain degree. For some kids, they enjoyed it. They did well and they prospered. But for others, I've seen a lot of kids that were doing extremely well in the classroom, just in a regular time when they were there, just in person. And then coming back, you can see that they struggled a little bit, even though they were high achieving students. A lot of them, missed that human connection that we needed, but especially our special needs students. That was really tough to see that.
Yes, definitely. And just that social piece too. They need that, so those social interactions with other students as well, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
So you did classroom teaching, and you did that for a number of years, and then all of a sudden, Lisa was thinking, well, I think I'd like to go into administration. So I always like to ask the question, because when I think about my story, I think that I've always known that I wanted to get there eventually, right from the get-go. I had this vision, I had this idea of what school should be like for the kids and for the staff. And so because of that, I was like, okay, you know what, I'd like to eventually, get to that position. But what was it for you, Lisa, that you're working in schools, you're having a good time working in spec ed, I would imagine, because you're talking about how that was your passion. So now you're thinking about going, to an administrative position. So what is it that brought you to that, to that position?
Well, I had a lot of wonderful mentors along the way, I have to
Okay.
say, and I was very fortunate to have many, different mentors, and a few of them, tapped on me to go into leadership and said, Lisa, really think that you should consider this. And I would get, little handouts in my mailbox at school when I was a
Oh,
teacher
really?
saying,
That's
do you want to
nice.
hit, do you want to, attend this workshop, or, this meeting, and just
Yeah.
doing different leadership work. So that really is what made me start thinking about it, and just making, you can make so much of a difference in a classroom. I think every educator makes a difference, but I wanted to continue to do more, right? So
Yeah.
that's really what pushed me to go into leadership as well.
Yeah, it's have that, that bigger, wider impact, if you want. It's at that level, it's not the same. We're not directly involved directly each and every day, every second with the students as the teachers are, but we are with the adults, right? And that's where our influence, is a lot bigger, is with the adults, and how we can lead them in terms of their growth, in terms of developing their leadership, and in terms of developing their growth mindset and what have you, because we know that's going to trickle down to the kids, right?
Definitely.
Yeah. So then, okay. So then you got into, administration, and you've been doing that for a number of years now. So what is it, and we'll get to OPC in a moment, but what is it about being a school principal that you love?
Well, there's not just one thing, just like being a teacher. I think there's so many things that I love, but obviously it's working with children and families and staff, and just being able to have those connections and make those connections with people. And I love just being able to be in the classrooms when I was a principal too. I would
Yeah.
love that's how I would start my day usually after announcements, is doing rounds and visiting classrooms, and seeing what's happening in the classrooms, making those interactions with students. And best way to get to know them is doing that. And I remember also wanting to go outside at recess, because that was the
Yeah.
best way to get to know your students, was being outside at recess as well, right? And seeing their social interactions, and finding out maybe there may be some students that are struggling at recess and have no one to socialize with. So keeping an eye on those students that might need a little help in that way. But definitely the connections that you make with students, families, and staff is one of the things that I love doing as a principal. And then just being able to share your learning and learn from each other, because
Yeah.
I really feel like everybody has strengths to offer, and we all have strengths in different areas. And you learn that as you get to know your students and your staff and your families, and then playing on those strengths, really, right? And
Absolutely.
yeah.
So, okay. So, being a principal, is a demanding job, of course. There's some good days, there's some days that aren't as good. So thinking back throughout the years, Lisa, I like to talk a lot about personal and professional development, growth, and how what I'm seeing in the work that I do in my board, and within the work that I do with Inspire Leadership. I see a lot of my colleagues, be it in Canada, United States, everywhere. I'm seeing, some of my colleagues just not making the necessary time, for their growth and their well-being. They're putting it's so easy for them to put that aside, because either they don't see it as being something important, they give it up right away. That time slot, if they did have it booked to do some reading or to do some writing, and they'll just give it away and say, okay, well, I'll go and I'll do something else. So what is it, Lisa? In which ways did you, make sure that you were still growing when you were in a principal position?
So I have to say that throughout my entire career in education, I don't think I've ever stopped taking courses.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've always taken courses from the beginning, because I took additional qualification courses,
Yeah.
and then took my principal's course, then did my master's, and just continued to take courses. I'm still actually taking courses right now, but I've always had a passion, for learning, and I think as educators we all do. So yeah, and even at staff meetings, just doing professional development, like often we would do a book club,
Yeah.
when I was principal, and I would buy a book for all the staff, and we would do a book study. But I do feel that it's really important to continue to pursue those professional learning opportunities, and there's so many out there now. And the nice part is you can do them online as well. And I'm always tapping into the Ontario Principal Council courses that they have, because they offer so many different ones. And
Hmm.
you have different ways of doing it. You can do it for an hour, you can do a book club. So it's listening to different speakers, and just it's nice to be able to have a variety and learn and take away from other presenters and different courses as well. But I do think it's so important, to
Yeah.
pursue those opportunities so that we can keep enriching our own learning.
Exactly. Like you said, everybody that we meet knows something that we don't know, so we can learn from them, right? So, speaking of OPC, what a great segue. So, here you were, you started off classroom teacher, went up to principal, and then there was this opportunity, I guess, that was presented to you, right? So this opportunity at OPC. So how explain to us, or tell us how you first got into working directly at OPC. I would imagine it was a detachment But how is it that you ended up there, and what are the reasons that took you there?
Yeah, okay. It's been quite a journey actually, and it started in 2016 with OPC. And one of my near north colleagues actually came to visit me and asked me if I was interested in, maybe being a counselor. And that's
Yes.
how I started. And usually there's a elementary and secondary counselor that goes down to Toronto 3 times a year
Yeah.
for the council meetings. It's not always in Toronto; it can be in other parts of the province as well now. So, he reached out to me to find out if I was interested, and I was, and then I became a counselor. And after 1 year of becoming a counselor, I was appointed as member at large on the OPC executive, which was an
Okay.
amazing opportunity. And I got to really get to know, what it was like to be on the executive. And then that kind of inspired me actually to go further with OPC. And then I put my name forward actually to be president-elect to start. And I had to do a speech, and all the members of OPC had to vote. And yeah, I
Wow.
was very fortunate to have that opportunity and to get in as president-elect. And it's been a third-year term for being the president, because 1 year I served as president-elect and then
Okay.
president last year, and now I'm still on the executive as past president. So yeah, so I've been involved with OPC since 2016, and it's been an amazing experience and journey for me.
Yeah, well, I guess so, all the people that you're meeting and the connections that you're really maximizing on that experience and taking back with you, as much as you can. And now it's your board that's actually benefiting from all that, all those connections that you made, the learning that you made, and the growth that you've known. So, what an opportunity, to be at the provincial level, as president, working in before, but eventually as president of, a profession, principals professional association. So you're really diving into exactly, what's going on with our colleagues as leaders. What is it that they need to grow, and where the association, or where we see, principals going in the future. So, as the time that you were at OPC, Lisa, I'm curious to know, when thinking about, what you were seeing, on the field, the feedback you were getting from school principals, what are some of the biggest needs that you were seeing out there, for principals?
Well, there's many. The role of principal continues to change, as I'm sure you're aware
Absolutely.
of. And, it's really changed in the last 5 years, definitely. And workload for principals has definitely increased. And that's something that, many of them shared with me when I was in my role as president. I got to visit many different boards across the province, and I got to hear, many of their concerns and areas of need. And that was definitely one, was, just the how often it changes, the role of principal, and it continues to change and evolve. And I think of my role now as assistant principal of equity and well-being, and just the equity issues that we're dealing with as principals and as educators in today's society. We have a lot that we deal with when it comes to equity work as well. And but definitely workload for principals, and just the role continuing to change. And there's so many hats that principals wear, and you know, um, because of the shortage now of teachers across the province as well. Many of our
Yeah.
principals, I'm sure you're aware, are in
Oh
the
yes.
class, covering classes
Oh
on a
yes.
regular basis. And that's a reality for many. And, just covering supervision is a big part of the day. And safety, of course, is a huge concern. And, we all love the role, and we became principals because, we love it. But definitely many challenges for principals, and there continues to be more and more.
Absolutely. So I'd say, especially in the last few years with job actions and whatnot. So, and definitely, even though I'm at a systemic position, I'm in a systemic position. We were called upon last year and this year again to actually, my team and I, to actually go to schools and give them, a helping hand, because they just didn't have, the bodies and, that were available to go into classrooms. So I've been up to New Liskeard, I've been to North Bay, just helping as much as we can. So it's definitely a stress, even though I'm not in the school anymore. I remember very well, that stress that begins at pretty much, well, the night before, but it just kicks back in at 6 a.m. when you're looking at, who's going to be there, who's not going to be there, who's sick. Do I have everybody that I need? So, it definitely is a stressful, it's a stressful job. There's a lot of positives to the job as well. But, I think you touched on something important, where it's a lot of hats, right? So And that's why I think it's really important for our principals to be able to have those opportunities to develop those competencies that, and to have those tools in their toolbox to be able to cope with that. So, thinking back on everything that she's seen, as president of OPC, Lisa, what are some of the things that our principals, and maybe some of them are listening to us right now, and they're struggling, they're struggling with time, they're struggling with pressure, they're struggling with with stress. Do you have a few things that you can share with them that they can do to try to alleviate that or try to cope with it and to actually develop, the good habits and have the right tools in their toolbox?
Yeah, I would definitely say it's important to have those that network of friends that you can lean on when you're a principal. And I was really fortunate that I had a group that I could lean on, and I still do, and reach out to, because sometimes you just need that second opinion. Sometimes
Yeah,
we're problem solvers as principals. That's what we do. We spend our days solving problems, right? And it's so important to make sure that you make time for yourself as well, but you also don't want to feel like everything lands on you. And that's why I think it's important when there is a challenge or there's a problem that you're solving. And if you're unsure, reach out to a friend and call them and take the time. Don't feel like you have to solve that problem like right away, because sometimes we do have that pressure where we feel like we've got to solve it right away. And,
yeah,
we've got people waiting for us to respond. But you know what? I think it's really important. I've learned that over the years, to take that time and make sure you do connect with someone that you trust, and find out, okay, what do you think? And share the examples and say, okay, what would you do if you were in this scenario? And it's just nice to get that second opinion sometimes, I think, right? So
absolutely.
yeah.
And the impatient part is so true. And you know what? In education, I was just talking about this with somebody last week, and it's just amazing how in education we are very impatient. And thinking back through the years, the one of the probably the best pieces of proof that I can get, that I can talk about right now, is whenever there's like a new curriculum or whenever there's a new initiative, we'll always have that feeling where, okay, just give it to me so that I can go and put it into place, right? And we want it, and we want everything in place, and we want all the supports in place right away. And it usually doesn't work like that, and then people get frustrated. But there definitely is that element of impatience where, and I think it's part because we're perfectionists a little bit in education. We want things to work out well for the kids, to have a good positive experience. But I think it's because we just want to get going. And for most of us in education, anyways, I think we're go-getters, and we're driven, and we just want to put those best practices and best strategies into place right away. So but sometimes it could backfire, and it can end up causing ourselves a lot of stress, right? Because then we'll want to put it right away into place, but all those structures aren't yet in place, right? That we can where we can support the schools, and that can create a little bit of impatience and a little bit of frustration, that's for sure. But
Mhm.
sometimes if we take the time to slow down and just think about it, I think we'll realize that a lot of the times we're actually causing it to ourselves.
Definitely, for sure. I agree. Yeah. And I think it's okay. It's okay to pause and say, you know what, let me look into this further, and let me connect with some other people that have been through this experience. And definitely just taking that time is important, because like you said, we do feel that pressure, and we want to make sure we're trying to please everybody as well. And I think it's important that we do sometimes just take a pause and make sure that we're looking into different areas as well, and making sure we're covering everything before giving an answer or trying to give a solution.
Absolutely. And that's important what you're talking about, connecting with colleagues and making sure that you're well surrounded with some colleagues that'll be able to push you forward, but also will be able to support you and push forward. I think is really, really important. So, it's one thing to say, to our colleagues, our leadership colleagues, that make sure that you're well surrounded. But I think we got to really take a look at what we're doing when we're together as well. So it's one thing to be able to talk and just debrief and things like that, but how important is it, Lisa, that as a school principal, as a school leader, I also create opportunities to be with my colleagues, but in terms of our growth, in terms of being really intentional in you know deciding or choosing activities that we can grow. How important is that?
Oh, it's so important. And, now we don't have that many opportunities to be together as we did in the past either with the supply shortages and,
That's
what I
right.
mean? So we're trying to be respectful of that. And so we don't always have that as much time as we used to in the past together. So we do have to make that time meaningful. And I think it's just really important to find out from our colleagues, what is it that you need support with? Find out what's the area that you need the most support with so that we can focus on that and discuss strategies together. I think it's also important to have time to have conversations as well, and
Yeah,
not just have a presentation and listening to it the whole time. It's really important to collaborate and have that time to collaborate with each other, because we learn so much just from listening to each other as well. And, oh, I didn't know you had that going on in your school, or I didn't know you were
exactly.
dealing with that challenge. So that's how we learn about those things, is by having that time to have those discussions and collaborate with each other. So I think that's important too, is to build that in when we are together, that time.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I have to say that the mastermind format for me has been a really big success, especially the part where, the part that we call the hot seat, right? Which is the most important part of what a mastermind group is. We'll do the book study, of course. So that's an important piece where we'll reading and then we'll come back and we'll discuss the chapters. But the hot seat is actually, and everybody has a turn in the hot seat at least once during the year. So every meeting, it's somebody's turn. And that person, what it is that person brings, a challenge that they're facing. Either and we just open it right up, right? We tell everybody it could be a challenge at work, it could be a challenge even at home. You need ideas because you'd like to start, jumpstart an initiative. So anything in that sense, the person brings to the hot seat. So we give them time to explain the situation. Not not by taking an hour, but in about 5 minutes, to be able to give us the gist of it. And then after that, the people that are in the group have an opportunity to be able to ask questions, clarifying questions, and then maybe give a few pointers. So that's just golden time. The principals love it when we do it, because like you said, it allows you to just press pause, because that's often what we don't do. We don't stop the machine to be able to think and slow down, right? So that's actually a time that we give ourselves intentionally in our calendar to be able to meet and say, listen, this is important. We need to learn. So we've got the book study, right? And we're learning with that. But we also need to exchange and to help each other out. So the mastermind and the hot seat has been a really positive experience for everybody.
That's wonderful. Yeah, at OPC we have something called trending topics, and we often, have many different topics that leaders are dealing with, and then we discuss them and collaborate, and they really, but they love that time together and just having that time to discuss and share. So we learn from each other and we take ideas away, and it's because we're such a large province too. In the southern boards they do things differently, in the
That's
northern
right.
boards they do things differently, so it's nice to hear from each other. And, oh, I didn't know, I've never tried that before, maybe we'll try that. So yeah, it's nice to have that time for sure.
So if people want to go and look to see what's going on, Lisa, I imagine you just go to the OPC website and see what kind of professional development that's available. Is that right?
That is right. Yes. Yeah. We, on our Ontario Principals Council website, they have all of our professional learning. You'll see a tab for professional learning, and they've got all the different offers that they have for professional learning are there, and you'll see everything that OPC has to offer for
Yeah.
sure.
So I think the important step, for everybody that's listening to us now, you got to go and see what's available, because if you don't go looking for it, it's not just going to fall in our laps. We know that. Yes, I think school boards more and more are realizing the importance of, that leadership development and the growth of our principals, but it's not where, anyways, it's not nowhere near where I'd like to see it. So we can't wait for those things to just fall in our laps. We got to actually intentionally get out there and find them. So that's a great place to start. Head out to that website and go and see what's available, because there's a bunch of different things, like Lisa was saying, that's available. Stuff that's deferred, stuff that's online, stuff that's self-paced, and then you got stuff that's live. So you know what? I think with a good time management system, if I go on the website and I see something that interests me, and I know that it's happening in 2 weeks, well, geez, get in your calendar, put it in, block off the time, and unless there's a super duper emergency at that moment, in your school, you should be protecting that time, right? To be able to participate with that, and you'll be glad you did. Because if we don't do that, and yes, during the day we can do it as well, as much as we can do it after class hours, but if we don't protect that time, if we don't block that time off on our schedule and actually make it a priority, then when are we going to do it? By the time we're done, it's usually past 4:30 in the afternoon. You're tired, you want to go home. A lot of us, have a lot of people still have small kids, they're running around. So, you got to really think about, when are the opportunities that I'm taking? When are they? Are they during the day? Are they in the evening? Or do I not have any at all? So the first step is to find them, because they won't fall in our laps, and then to really put it in your calendar, I think, and be intentional about it. And another thing I would say, Lisa, is, don't do it alone. Get out there, and, you were talking about the importance of surrounding ourselves with our colleagues. And so go out, reach out to 2 or 3 other principals and say, hey, what are you guys doing next Thursday at this time? OPC's got this going, and I think it'd be fun. So why don't we all block it off in our calendars, and then we'll just connect and we'll be there together. Right. So I think it's important, and it's something that I'm not seeing often enough.
Yeah, and we do have a lot after school as well, because I know it's hard during the day when you're running a building, you know what I mean, to
Yeah.
be on these sessions as well. But they do have, some in the evenings as well, and usually they're only an hour long, so it's not too much of a commitment. But it's nice to be able to participate in those, because what I really love is the provincial perspective, and
Mm.
hearing what other boards are doing as well, and making those connections, right?
Absolutely. And you never know what could come out of there, right? Like opportunities can come out of those connections that you make. And, some of those connections might even save you from a burnout if you're feeling like you're going to burn out, like literally. That's why, get your colleagues involved, and go and find those opportunities, be it at OPC website. There's a whole bunch of stuff, like you said, Lisa, that's going on. It's, stuff that's easy to find. If you don't know where to start, Lisa just shared a great place where, you can start, and that's at the OPC website. So go check it out, and just be intentional. When I'm speaking to the people that are listening to us today, just be intentional. Go pick something, put it in your calendar, and protect that time. And because it's time for you, give yourself that gift, because if you don't, no one else will. Nobody's going to walk into your office and force you to get in your calendar and to block that day off so that you can grow as a leader. We have to get out there and do that, right?
That is true.
Absolutely. So quite the perspective, in terms of the province. So you've seen, what was going on for the principals, their needs. And now you're in a new position. So you are the vice principal of equity and well-being. Is that correct?
System principle of
Assistant
equity and
principal. Sorry.
system. Yeah. System principle of equity and
System.
well-being.
Yes.
Yeah.
System principal. Okay.
Yes.
So, Lisa, in the work that you do, I know that you do a lot of work with the students, but do you guys do some work as well with the adults when it comes to, equity and well-being?
Yes, we do. Yes, for sure. Yeah, definitely supporting school leaders with their equity journeys and equity learning as well. And equity is hard work. It's everybody's work. And yeah, so no, I'm supporting not just students, but staff as well, and school leaders as well.
So what would you say is like the biggest, when I think about equity and the work that we do in our board, um, I find that one of the biggest barriers, just to start off with, is getting, the people to think about that kind of thing, right? Because, we weren't talking about it as much before. Now, we're talking about it a lot. So it's just to get it into that routine where I'm trying to spot these things. I'm trying to create, these opportunities. So are there any other challenges that you're seeing that school leaders are trying to overcome when it comes to equity?
Well, I think there's many challenges for school leaders right now when it comes to equity and for students. And it's, just making sure that all of our students feel safe and
Yeah.
accepted is so important. And as school leaders, it's, our responsibility to do that, to make sure that every child feels safe and secure and accepted at school.
Absolutely, absolutely, and the adults as well, right? Because like I was saying, as a principal, our first level of influence is with the adults, right? So we got to make sure that our adults are also, feeling safe, that they feel good, they're happy to be there, and there's a lot of work to be done around that. And that's another one of the reasons why, being a school leader is a big responsibility, right? Because it's not just about, filling out reports and doing the master schedule for the classes, right? It's a lot more than that. We're talking about supporting people. We're talking about, being a leader. We're talking about wanting to reproduce leaders on your staff. And a big part of that, because we're human beings, right, is making sure that, our staff our students, of course, and our parents, but our staff are in a good place as well.
That's right. Yeah. And everybody's on a different journey with their learning, right? And it's okay. Everyone's at different levels of learning, and I think it's just reaching out and saying, this is what I need to learn more about, and I could use some support in this area. Not thinking that we have to know everything, because nobody knows everything. And I will
Yeah.
tell you, I don't know everything. I'm learning. I continue to learn every day. And I think it's important for everybody to realize that you don't have to, know everything or be expected to know everything.
Absolutely. So are you seeing a lot of, Lisa, a lot of school leaders actually like, thinking about their own well-being, or is it something that you're still seeing that, we're 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 in that servant leadership type of thing, right? So we're always there for other people. We want everything to be perfect. We want them to be well. So are we seeing a lot of leaders, putting that first before their own well-being?
I think that as leaders, that's our tendency, is we always are looking out for everybody else first, and putting their needs before our own. But definitely, I think principals are starting to realize too that it's how important it is to take care of ourselves as well, right? Because if we're not doing well ourselves, we can't help others, right? So
Yeah.
that's definitely key for sure. But I know that, as school leaders, we're always looking for ways to support others as well, right? And looking at the well-being of others, of our students and our staff and our families, right?
Yeah. Sometimes I find that, when we talk about, and I always come back to thinking about the concept of the oxygen mask in an airplane, right? When the oxygen mask, falls out in case of an emergency, well, they tell you the first person you got to put it on is yourself, right? I think there's like a guilt almost associated with that, where because I've worked with a lot of people in the past where we talked about professional development and growth and when can we do it, and then whenever I would talk about either doing it during the school day or when they were in the office, it was almost like a sense of guilt where they felt like they couldn't do it, or they weren't supposed to be doing it, or they felt guilty because they felt like they should be taking care of other people first and not taking care of themselves. I don't know, have you been seeing that as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think there is some guilt there for sure. Because as I said, as leaders, we're always putting everybody else's needs before us, and we feel like that's our job, right? When we're running a building or running a school, we want to take care of the whole school community. So yes, there definitely is guilt when we're taking care of ourselves. But I think people are also starting to realize, just the importance of making sure we're well as well. And I think a lot of that happened over COVID as well,
Yeah.
taking care of our own well-being as well. Because if all you do is work 24/7, you know, uh, eventually, something's going to happen. You're going to burn out, right? So it's important to take time for yourself as well, and find things that you find pleasure in doing, right?
Yeah. And that's
Mhm.
really important what you just said, Lisa. And what I found in the last few years that's really important to do as well is, once you do find those things that you love doing, what you're passionate about, how can you bring that into your work? Right.
Mhm.
And I remember I've got a colleague in Quebec, and he's also a podcaster. And we had met, to see if we can collaborate on different projects. And he was talking about it, and he was talking about, he was a grade 5 teacher, right? And he's talking about how, he's starting to feel a little stagnant where he is, and maybe he needs a change. And then we started talking about, well, I about podcasting and how he loves it. And I said, well, did you ever think about bringing it inside the classroom? As a means, to do your language and your communication bit and all that. So, you know, take what you're passionate about and find a way to bring it in. And he did. He actually brought it in with that grade 5 class, and it totally changed his motivation as well. So I think it's a great way to be able to, to give us that fuel that we need to be able to keep going, is to find, what we're passionate about, but find ways that we can bring it into our work.
I agree completely.
And I think there are different ways. I've had teachers that have started book clubs. I've had them, start different clubs. It could have been sports clubs. It could have been, a different activity. So I think that there are ways that we can bring it in, and that'll help us really to overcome, that sense of loneliness, that sense of repetitiveness of always doing the same thing. If we're bringing in something that we're really passionate about, that's what's going to fuel us, and it's what's going to create that anticipation that we want to come into work. And and like you said, it'll prevent us from burning out.
Definitely.
So
Definitely.
yeah, so I think it's such important work that you're doing in terms of equity and well-being. And I just think that your experience, at the provincial level with OPC was also really interesting. So Lisa, if I were to ask you, where do you see yourself down the line in 4 or 5 years? I know we talked a little bit before we pressed record, and thinking about because we both started at around the same time, and our retirement date is close, and it's coming quick. So thinking in 3, 4, 5 years, where do you see yourself? Is it still in
That's a good
education? Is
question.
it,
Yeah.
yeah?
Yeah, it's a good question. I believe I'll still be doing work in education, and I'm not sure to what capacity, but I know I love change, and I've been through many different roles throughout my career. And
Mhm.
so I look forward, to doing many different things before I retire. So it's hard to say where I'll be, but I definitely, am excited about what's to come in the future for sure. And I just look forward to continuing to support educators and to continue to take courses, because like I said, that's always been a passion of mine, is learning, and I want to continue to do that. And yeah, it'll be interesting. I can't really tell you where I'll be, but I'm sure I'll be doing something, that I enjoy, and hopefully making a difference.
Yeah, well, you certainly sound excited about it, and which brings me to my next question, because I also went through a similar experience where I went on detachment as well to the ministry, and for me, it was really a transformational experience, right? Like I came back a different educator, a different leader. So, what kind of an impact did your experience at OPC, taking that risk and saying, you know what, I'm going to go and I'm going to try this. What kind of an impact do you think that that has had on your career and on your mindset?
Well, I feel like I've always had a growth mindset, but even more, I would say, from that experience, because I got to see so many different, there was so many different opportunities for me, and
Mm,
I got to visit different provinces as well, and many different boards, and just learning from so many. And I think what blew me away was just, the passion that we as educators have
yeah.
uh, for making a difference. And there's so many wonderful things going on out there. And when I visit every district, I have to say I was blown away by the work that we're doing, and just so grateful to see uh, that investment that everybody makes into education, all of our leaders across the province. So we're always trying to do better, and better for our students, better for our staff, better for our families. So it definitely did enrich me for sure. And I got to meet with the ministry, meet with the Minister of Education,
Wow.
and share my perspective as a leader as well, which, and I feel like everybody has something to share, right? Like I said earlier about our strengths, we all have different strengths to share. So, but it definitely did make an impact on me, that experience, and I'm very grateful for it. And I feel like it just broadened my perspective, and definitely, my growth mindset has gotten even, bigger that way.
Yeah.
And I feel like the learning never ends, right? Like there's so much to
Love it.
learn. Yes.
Absolutely. So, I think the message for the people listening to us today is, whenever you do, have an opportunity that comes up and it's a risk, well, sometimes it's worth taking because we never know where it's going to bring us. We never know what other doors it's going to open, and don't wait for the opportunity to show up, because we need to get ready now. Take the steps, take care of yourself, prioritize your growth, and then whenever that opportunity comes knocking at the door, you're going to be ready, because if you're not, it's too late. The opportunity is there and it's going to knock, and it's going to go. So it's always worth investing in yourself. That's a great return on your investment, no matter what. But then whenever opportunities come up, like like yours, Lisa, with OPC, and even this position as assistant principal of equity and well-being, you had to accept, you had to want to go for it. So, and it's a risk, right? Because anything that's new, well, we don't know what it's going to be like, how it's going to change our lives. But if we don't take the risk, well, then there might not be any gains, right? But you made sure that you were ready for that risk, and you kept growing, and you made that a priority. So I think that's an important message for our listeners today to understand. Take care of it, schedule it in, protect that time, and just make sure that you're growing as a leader.
Yes.
So listen, Lisa, it's been great talking with you. If we have somebody that'd like to get a hold of you, in which way can they do that?
So they can email me at my Near North email, which is lisa.collins@nearnorthschools.ca. That would be the best way to reach me for sure.
Perfect. And for anybody that's looking for that email address, it is on the website. So you just need to head over to inspireleadership.ca in the podcast section. You'll find Lisa's page there with the show notes and that email address. So if you want to reach out to Lisa, any questions, or, if you need to be guided somewhere, I'm sure that Lisa, it'll be her pleasure to be able to help you out. So listen, Lisa, I've got one last question for you before I let you get on with your life. For the people that are listening to us right now, Lisa, if you had one wish for them, what would that wish be?
One wish for them would probably be to, just continue to be inspired, to learn more and to do more to support students and families and staff. I think it's just being inspired to do more, and there's always more to do, right?
Yeah.
And when I say more, I don't mean like you got to go above and beyond, but just looking into different areas, doing research, finding out different supports that are available to support families and staff and students. I feel like there's so many supports out there that we don't always know about, and so it's just continuing to be inspired to support, I think, is so important as a leader.
Yeah, and like you said before, don't think you have to do everything yourself. So how
That's
about
right.
we go from being a mile wide and an inch deep to actually saying, what, as a leader, this is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to go really, deep within that and make sure that my impact is a heck of an impact to be felt.
That's right.
That's great, Lisa. So listen, thank you so much for being here on the podcast with me tonight. It was great talking with you. Good luck in your next steps. We'll keep in touch for sure. And, I hope you have a great year in this new position. So good things to come. And so thanks for being here with us tonight.
Thank you, Joelle. I really appreciate it being on the show. So thank you.
Great.
I wish you well as well.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.